Welcome to 2Republics, where we spotlight global voices, youth-led dialogue, and the future of US-India relations. Glad you're here, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Today, we're pleased to welcome a leader whose career bridges diplomacy, innovation, and social impact. Mr. Donald Gibbs is currently the CEO of the Skoll Foundation, where he champions social entrepreneurs tackling the world's most urgent challenges, from climate change to inclusive development. But his story spans far beyond the foundation world. As U.S. Ambassador to South Africa under President Obama, Mr. Gibbs helped strengthen the ties between the two vibrant nations, and his diplomatic service was recognized with the State Department's highest award for exemplary performance. He also served at the heart of the U.S. government, first as Chief Domestic Policy Advisor to Vice President Al Gore, then in the White House as the head of the presidential personnel, where he oversaw the appointment of thousands of public servants during a transformative era. Outside of government, Mr. Gibbs led global strategy, advised multinational businesses, and helped shape digital infrastructure across Africa. His journey reflects a rare blend of public purpose and private innovation. At 2Republics, we don't just analyze the US-India bilateral relationship, but we are also all about getting young people involved in global conversations, building new civic ideas, and rethinking what diplomacy can look like in today's world. So today, we'll be asking Mr. Gibbs about the future of leadership in a time that's changing fast. Thank you so much for joining with us. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Karen. Boy, I wish I knew that guy you introduced. He sounded really nice.
That's great. You've had a dynamic career spanning diplomacy, tech, philanthropy, and public service. What first sparked your interest in international relations and public policy?
I think I've always been interested in solving big problems, being involved in with teams that were working on big problems. And, as um, growing up in a family that was well off and privileged, I also felt an obligation to give something back, and uh, really started traveling as a teenager and went to Latin America, and then um, to Europe, and just the world was so fascinating and so many interesting issues that I felt like I wanted to be a part of that. And after I finished my undergrad, ended up running a refugee camp in Sri Lanka, went to go do development, and their civil war broke out. So my whole life has sort of been shaped by these issues.
That's great. Do you have like any specific region? I know you've worked in South Africa, but was there any region where you was like, this is the work that I want to do for the rest of my life? Or is there any particular area?
I obviously have a huge soft spot for Africa and South Africa, but also concerned about things back here in the US and the challenges here. And uh, so I think I'm more interested in the whole global set of issues. I think Africa offers some ways both the biggest challenges and opportunities because of the youth bulge happening in Africa, and if and the impacts of climate, et cetera, are more extreme in Africa. So it's going to be a pivotal part of whether we have global stability or not. And so I guess if I had to pick one, but I also I know you focused your work on India and the US, and that's a huge part of the equation. I just came back from India with
Right.
actually your aunt in October. And, India is laying out new pathways for the art of the possible. And I think will be one of the huge forces in the world. So I don't have, I have a soft spot for Africa, but I'm interested in the whole global landscape.
That's great. Can you tell us a special experience you've had as US ambassador to South Africa? And what does it mean to you? And in general, what was that job like?
So the first answer to your question is there were so many special experiences, it's hard to pick one out, but meeting Mandela was probably uh, the most special moment, just because, I met him later in his life, but he
Right.
still had that spark and that wisdom. And I wear this bracelet on my arm all the time, which is his prison number,
Oh, wow.
to remind me really of how as a leader to listen first, to understand who sits across the table from you, or in his case, his prison warders, to really not just to take a real interest in them as people, because that's the only way you're going to understand how to move them and how to find common ground. And so he probably shaped my thinking on the world and how to behave as a human more than anybody. I also, being an ambassador is and doing it for President Obama, um, was really a unique role because you actually took got to put yourself and see your country through the eyes. If you're doing the job well, you're seeing your country through the eyes of other people. And, we have a long history with South Africa,
Of
a
course.
more complicated chapter being written right now, but where for a long time we were on the wrong side of history supporting the apartheid regime. And that shaped for a very long time their view of America and the world. And it was really helpful to understand that and understand how making those wrong decisions as a country can shape a very long trajectory and history of relationship with that country.
That's great. You were once in the Situation Room helping guide US global personnel and their decisions, and now you empower entrepreneurs tackling climate change and inequality. How do you think the definition of global leadership has changed from your White House days to now as CEO of Skoll?
Yeah, let me just, well, not the Situation Room, but the White House.
Right.
Um, Look, I think I've been blessed in my career to work in public sector, private sector, and now civil society. And I think one of the most important, I think all of these global problems we are facing, you need all three to work together to solve those problems, and each has a unique role. And civil society and social innovators can take much more risk than people in government can. So they can try new models. Government, there's a high penalty if you fail, because you're doing things at such scale, but government has more scale.
Right.
Private sector has more resources. So you need all three to work in conjunction if we're going to address any of these issues. And I feel really blessed in my career to have had experience in all three, which I think helps me understand the problem across multiple contexts, and help find those common areas where you can come together around solutions. Uh, but it's all three are incredible places to work. I think right now, part of the reason I came to Skoll was a belief that we needed new approaches to some of these problems, that what was coming out of Washington or capitals around the world weren't rising to the moment. And I wanted to work in a setting where you could take some risks and think differently about these problems. So it's been an exciting moment to do that.
Yeah, building off that point, you currently lead the Skoll Foundation, which supports those social entrepreneurs worldwide. What role specifically do you see social entrepreneurship playing in solving today's biggest global challenges?
I think social entrepreneurs and social innovation broadly plays the essential role of asking why do we do it this way? And is there a better way to do it? To constantly be looking at the system and saying, how can we innovate in a way that's more effective for delivery of service, less expensive, more has a bigger impact? I'll give an example. There's an organization called M Pharma that won the Skoll Award that really was trying to think about, in Africa, how do you deliver pharmacy services more effectively? How do you take the middlemen out of the supply chain so that you can drive
Right.
down costs? And then they had the insight that these pharmacies are all over the world in villages. How do we turn them into primary healthcare centers, which is a brilliant insight with the advances in technology. How do we support these pharmacists to deliver healthcare more effectively beyond their current scope? It's good for the pharmacy. Business wise, they have more business. It's good for the customers and patients who are getting better service closer to their home. So it's one of those win-win innovations that social innovators come up with. And then recently, that the CEO of M Pharma, Greg Roxon, was giving a speech at a conference, and the head of one of the big healthcare companies in the United States saw it and said, "Hey, we need to do that in rural parts of America. Will you come here and do that same model?" So I love it because it's an example of a social innovation.
Right.
It's designed for one of the most resource deprived parts of the world. But because it's such a great innovation, it works in a place where there's more resources, but still a lot of inequality. So they're rolling it out here in the US right now.
That's great that, sometimes when we're looking at the world, we tend to forget about rural America as well. So it's great to see that you're working there as well. At Two Republics, we also focus on engaging young people. I mean, that's the core value of our organization in meaningful global dialogue. You've served both as a diplomat and you're leading the foundation. In an age of like Instagram diplomacy and rising youth activism, what role do you think the newer generations should play in foreign policy, not just as voters or volunteers, but as creators of new civic systems from your perspective?
Well, I think people like you are social innovators. You're look, I'm the media ecosystem that we live in now. There's a great piece that really shaped my view on this called by that was in Axios that talked about in my era, people used to look at the world through, and this was mostly a US piece, but it's applicable
Right.
broadly. People used to look at the world through a few windows: television, radio,
Yep.
newspaper. Then in this era, uh, those windows have been shattered, and they now look at the world through multiple shards of glass, social influencers, Instagram, and the way the algorithms work that drive much of social media were driven into confirmation bias. So we're in silos with people who share our belief sets and aren't breaking out of those belief sets. And unfortunately, we're also driven by negativity bias. It's easier to gather people's attention with negative content. Um, you can do it with positive content. You can do it with art, music, humor. It's
Right.
just harder. You have to be better. Um, and so you all, because this technology is, I'm not on social media. You all need to come up with ways to push back against that division.
Right.
Be the innovators who find those solutions that bridge across difference and tell those stories in a way that appeals to the angel on our shoulder rather than the devil, because we all have both, and really moves people forward. And I think that's one of the big challenges for your generation is to help not just find better answers, but communicate them in a way that rises above the media ecosystem that unfortunately we're living in right now.
Right. Building off that point, you've been mentored by legends and you're working for visionary leaders, but you've also shaped those new systems yourself. For students running those platforms like Two Republics, what would be your best advice on sustaining those ideas and where a world might not be so friendly to youth and youth innovators? I mean, I've personally seen the struggle. So, what would your advice? I know you kind of touched on that in the previous question, but what would you say for this?
I think not to sound trite, but change is hard.
Yeah.
And um, you know, it's part of why at Skull we've created the Skull, Jeff created the Skull World Forum to bring together social innovators because you need support. It is a lonely world out there when you're trying to change things. So I'd say a couple is you're doing these journeys, first, find allies, find others who are trying to do similar things and build your network to be a support network to help you get through this periods where the inevitable periods of challenge and the other thing is be brave but be listening. Um, it takes courage to do what you're trying to do, and many of the people you're working with are trying to do. At the same time, you have to surround yourself with people who will tell you, hey, Cara, maybe that isn't the way to do this.
Right.
Or, um, you know, uh, hey, have you thought about trying it this way? Because I think you need those voices, trusted voices who are comfortable enough to give you the advice of that you can keep improving what you're doing. Because I, I truly believe social change is a team sport, and if you're going to do it, you gotta like the best teams have people with very diverse skill sets on them that working in concert, they can really drive change.
Yeah, thank you so much. That last line, which you said that you're going to have people that will, have to say no sometimes and will have to, give you some tough answers. That's really important, and that's partly why I do this. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your insights and sharing your knowledge to our viewers. Really appreciate that.
Well, can I just thank you for caring so much about the world and at your age, changing the world and getting out there. And, I'm so impressed with all that you've already done, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do going forward.
Really appreciate it.